They had already signed the papers. In a concrete room behind a county shelter, a German shepherd paced in tight, frantic circles at the end of a catchpole. His muzzle was crusted with dried blood that wasn't his. Yellow caution tape flapped limp along the chain-link wall. The clock above the steel door ticked toward the end. Aggressive, unmanageable, liability. The vet tech holding the syringe avoided looking into the dog's eyes. Nobody wanted to admit that, under the snarl and the scars, something else lived there, something that remembered. His last chance was a man who had promised himself he was never going to help anybody ever again. A man who woke up every night hearing a boy screaming in a language he didn't speak. A man named Ethan Cole. He wasn't supposed to be there. He should have been in the back of his trailer on the edge of town, pretending that the sound of trains moving through the Indiana night was just steel on steel, not rotor blades or artillery. He should have been ignoring his phone, ignoring the Veterans Affairs counselor, ignoring the whole world. But that morning, when the call came and the counselor said one brief loaded sentence, "They picked up a military dog with your unit's code on his chip," Ethan answered. "Before we start, if this story finds you in a place where you feel alone, where your past feels heavier than your future, just know this. Somewhere out there, there is a Rex waiting to prove you wrong." The November air over Cedar Falls, Indiana, lied the way Midwestern mornings always did. It looked clean, pale blue, clear, harmless. But it bit. It slid under denim and flannel and old army hoodies, settled into the joints and the scars, woke up the pain that never really slept. Ethan stood on the narrow porch of his trailer, coffee cooling in his hand, watching his breath fog the glass of the mug. At 38, he looked 10 years older and 10 years younger all at once. A man whose body had been carved hard by discipline and ruined soft by loss. He had the build of the Army Ranger he used to be, but the way he held himself was different now. Less like a weapon, more like something trying very hard not to go off. The railroad tracks lay a quarter-mile away behind the scrub and the skeletal trees, a line of rusted steel that divided Cedar Falls into past and pretending. The trains were already moving, hauling grain, coal, and other people's futures to other people's towns. Ethan's phone buzzed again in his pocket. He considered ignoring it. He'd tried therapy once. He'd tried support groups and medication and prayer and drowning everything in the bottom of a whiskey bottle. Nothing had brought back the boy from the alley in Mosul. Nothing had changed the fact that on the worst night of his life, he'd shouted the wrong order. "Cole?" The voice on the other end was careful, measured. He knew that voice. Dr. Lena Hart, VA psychologist for their region, the only one he hadn't slammed a door on. "They told me if I didn't answer, you'd just keep calling," Ethan muttered. "You answered," Lena said. He could hear the relief she tried to hide. "That's something? Don't get excited. I'm not coming to group." "This isn't about group." A pause. Papers rustling. "How much do you remember about Operation Sandstone Echo?" "Everything. Nothing. A wall of fire. A boy in a green shirt. A dog barking hoarse in the dust." "I remember enough," he said. "They found a dog," Lena said quietly. "Not on base. In a busted-up warehouse outside Chicago. Someone was using him for illegal security work. He attacked a man. Badly. Animal control scanned his chip. His ID tag has Sandstone Echo's contractor code burned into the metal. And your name in the metadata. Could be another Ethan Cole. It has your rank too," she said gently. "Staff sergeant. Same unit. Same call sign." Ethan stared at the tracks until they blurred. Memory tried to shove its way in. His mind shoved back. "What do they want?" he asked. "The county shelter classified him as dangerous," Lena said. "Because of the incident, they need him evaluated before they put him down. And because he's tagged as a former military working dog, the DOD wants to say they made every effort before they sign off." Another pause. "They asked me if I knew anyone from that unit who might be able to handle him." Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Let me guess. You told them to call the guy who hasn't left town in 3 years unless he's buying cigarettes." "I told them you were the best handler I'd ever seen," Lena replied, "and that if there was anything left of the soldier inside that dog, you'd be the only one he'd trust. That dog's not my responsibility. Maybe he shouldn't be." Her voice softened. "But they're going to kill him in an hour, Ethan. You can stay on your porch and let that happen. Or you can come down here and prove me wrong. The Cedar Falls County Animal Shelter tried its best not to smell like fear. They pumped citrus cleaner through the vents, mopped twice a day, kept the stainless steel surfaces shining. Posters of happy adoptable cats and backyard-to-couch success stories lined the lobby walls. The front desk had a bowl of treats in a jar labeled "Donation for Doggo." But underneath it all, beneath the plastic and the bleach and the cheerful volunteer chatter, was the sharp, sour scent of adrenaline and despair. Animals knew the difference between "here for shots" and "this is the last stop." Ethan knew that smell from other places. The receptionist's eyes flicked to the faded Ranger tab stitched on his hoodie, to the VA card he slid across the counter. She pushed a clipboard toward him like a shield. "Ed, sign in, please. Dr. Hart said you were coming." Down the main corridor, the barking rose and fell like a storm. Some dogs lunged at the bars, mouths wide, teeth flashing. Others pressed against the back walls, ears plastered, the whites of their eyes showing. A few wagged hopefully at every passerby, desperate to be chosen. Lena was waiting by a locked steel door marked "Staff Only." She wore her usual uniform, dark jeans, boots, a blazer over a soft sweater, but there were new lines around her eyes. "You did come," she said. "Part of me thought—" "I'm just here to look," Ethan cut in. "That's it." "For most people, that's not nothing," she answered. The tech who met them on the other side of the door had nervous hands and the kind of exhaustion that came from too many long shifts. His badge read, "Keith." "He's in holding 3, Keith said. "We tried the usual, treats, soft voice, pressure wraps. He wants to eat all of us." He fumbled a keyring. "You sure you don't want a catch pole, sir?" "If you open that door with a catch pole," Ethan said quietly, "you're telling him you already decided who he is." Keith swallowed and nodded, palms sweating around the keys. The hallway on the other side felt colder, thicker, as if the concrete itself had absorbed the echo of every last bark and whine and whimper that never got answered. Holding 3 had no windows, just cinder block and a drain in the floor. Fluorescent light hummed overhead, harsh and sterile. In the center of the room, chained to a heavy bolt in the floor, stood the dog. Ethan had seen photos, grainy files from Lena's email. Nothing had prepared him for the reality. The German Shepherd was big even by working dog standards, broad chest, heavy shoulders, powerful haunches. His coat was a dark sable, black and charcoal bleeding into burnt gold along his flanks. A white scar slashed across his muzzle like someone had tried to erase his face and failed. His eyes were wrong, not dull, not wild, bright. A feral, furious amber that tracked every movement with an intelligence that burned. He didn't bark when they opened the door. He didn't lunge. He stood very still, muscles coiled, head low. The chain rattled as his weight shifted, the only sound in the room. "He took a piece out of a security contractor last week," Keith said, voice a little too shaky. "Real serious bite. Guy needed surgery, filing a lawsuit. The county commissioner is already on my boss's ass about it." "What's his name?" Ethan asked. The tech looked at his clipboard. Shelter intake called him Diesel. "No," Ethan said absently. "The name on the chip." Keith hesitated. It came up coded, letters and numbers." Lena stepped forward. "The encrypted file flagged him as a former asset. That's all they'd tell me." She studied Ethan's face. "Are you okay?" He wasn't. The moment he'd stepped through the door, something inside him had snapped tight, like a wire being pulled. There was a sound in his head, metal on concrete, sand in his teeth, a voice calling something he couldn't remember. The dog shifted, tracking him. "Can you get closer?" Lena murmured. "You want me alive, right?" Ethan said, but his feet were already moving. Rex, the dog didn't know that name yet, but it would be his. Watched everything. No scent of fear from this one. No jittery hands. No high-pitched comfort noises. Just a man with old scars and steady breathing. The stranger stopped a few feet away. Their eyes met. Rage met emptiness. Recognition flickered where there should have been none. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. The room swayed. For a second, holding 3 wasn't concrete and fluorescent light. It was a narrow alley choked with dust and smoke, the air boiling with heat. Someone was screaming. A child. high and raw. He heard another sound behind it, barking, hoarse, desperate, trying to be louder than the gunfire. "Cole!" a voice shouted in the memory, bitter and incredulous. "If you go back in there, you die." He saw a shape hurling itself through the smoke, a dog, this dog, or a dog like him. Teeth bared, eyes blazing, vanishing into the fire. "Rex, with me!" The words tore out of Ethan's throat on their own, scraping raw. The dog flinched as if struck. For one heartbeat, his hackles bristled higher, the chain rattled. Then something broke. The snarl that had been building died in his chest. His lips dropped back over his teeth. His ears, tight to his skull a second before, flicked forward. He sat. Not in surrender, in attention. Like a soldier reporting for duty, Keith swore under his breath. "What the—" Lena didn't say anything at all. Her hand had flown to her mouth, eyes wide, as the impossible unfolded in front of her. The dog, diesel, asset, monster, whatever label they had given him, stared at Ethan with something like disbelief. With every slow, deliberate breath the man took, the dog's shoulders eased the tiniest fraction. "What did you say?" Lena whispered. "I don't know," Ethan said. But he did. The name tasted like ash and smoke on his tongue. Rex. The paperwork that saved a life took 20 minutes to sign and 10 seconds to ruin 10 other careers. "He's your responsibility now," Shelter Director Marla Hayes said, sliding the last form across the metal table in her cluttered office. "If he so much as nicks a mailman, animal control will be at your door with a warrant and a camera crew." "I get it," Ethan replied. He didn't mention that the terms didn't scare him. He'd woken up every morning for 3 years wanting something to hurt him and end everything. Taking responsibility for a creature more dangerous than he was felt almost appropriate. Lena sat across from him, fingers folded around a paper cup of coffee she'd forgotten to drink. "We'll do this my way," she said. "Gradual exposure, controlled environment, boundaries. If we rush this, you both crash and burn. Understood? And if we don't do it at all, he's dead," Ethan said. She didn't argue. They fitted a heavy leather collar around the dog's neck, not the rough frayed piece he'd come in with. That had been bagged and tagged and sent off to a lab at the base, but a new one, stamped with a name that hadn't belonged to him until now. Rex. The first time Ethan clipped the leash, Rex didn't snap. He didn't flinch. He just tilted his head, eyes searching Ethan's face like there was something there he remembered. "Easy, buddy," Ethan said, voice low. The word felt strange in his mouth. He hadn't called anyone buddy in a long time. The walk from the back room to the sunlight was 15 steps. 15 steps with a loaded weapon attached to his hand. 15 steps during which every nerve in Ethan's body screamed that this was insane. Rex walked at his heel, not perfectly, not neatly, but his body stayed parallel. His head turned when Ethan's shoulder turned. When a cart rattled in a nearby hallway, his muscles bunched, lips twitching. Ethan tightened the leash a hair. "With me," he murmured. The dog pressed closer. They made it to the parking lot without blood. "That's your truck?" Marla called from the doorway, a clipboard hugged to her chest like armor. Ethan glanced back at the faded blue Ford with the dented front bumper. The one thing the bank hadn't taken when he'd stopped making payments on everything else. "Yeah," Marla sighed. "I'll pretend I didn't see him riding in the cab. Ma'am, if he rides in the bed and sees something he doesn't like and jumps, we'll both be on the news." She considered that, then grimaced. "Fair point. Check in every day. I mean it, Cole. Every day. If you ghost on us, I send a unit." Ethan almost laughed. "You think I own more than one place to hide?" The first night with Rex was louder than any gunfight Ethan had been in. Not because the dog barked. Rex didn't waste noise. It was the silence that screamed. Every creak of the trailer, every train in the distance, every engine on the county road, every footstep from the neighbor's porch. Each sound slid under Rex's skin and lit him from within. He paced, back and forth across the narrow living room, claws clicking on the linoleum. Every time he reached the door, he stopped, nostrils flaring. Every time he passed the window, his ears pricked toward the outside world. The worn furniture, the stack of bills, the empty beer bottles, none of it existed for him. Only the perimeter. Ethan watched from his spot on the sagging couch, hands loose on his knees. He'd brought home plenty of broken dogs in his career, animals that flinched at raised voices, that shook at the sound of fireworks, that tore at their own fur rather than trust a human hand. Rex was different. He wasn't afraid of Ethan, wasn't exactly comfortable either. He acknowledged him the way a junior officer acknowledged a superior, warily, calculating, waiting to see which way the power flowed. "Hey," Ethan said softly when Rex's pacing took him too close to the coffee table. "Sit." The dog stopped. He glanced at Ethan, then at the table. His jaw worked. Ethan could almost see the calculations. Sit meant vulnerability. It meant not being able to spring. But it also meant acknowledging that the man on the couch had a say. Rex sat. "Good," Ethan murmured. He didn't reach for him, didn't try to pet him. Human contact wasn't a reward to a dog whose last human had used hands to hurt. Instead, he tossed a piece of boiled chicken he'd hidden in his palm earlier. It landed between them, halfway. Rex watched, then inched forward and ate it, never taking his eyes off Ethan. "This is going to take time," Lena had warned when she dropped them off and given Ethan a bag of supplies and a list of emergency numbers that was longer than his grocery list. He's not a pet. He's a professional whose entire career taught him that the world ends in noise and fire. You can't hug that out of him. Ethan had almost told her that he understood that better than she knew. Around midnight, the trains came heavier. The third one hit some metal joint in the track just wrong, and the sound of the wheels screeching against steel tore through the night like a rocket. Rex exploded. He was up off the floor and at the window in an instant, barking, snarling, throwing his full weight against the thin glass. The trailer shook. The blinds snapped. Somewhere outside, a car alarm went off. Ethan was on his feet before he knew he'd moved. "Rex!" His voice cracked. "Hey!" The dog spun, teeth bared, pupils blown wide. For a split second, Ethan saw what everyone else saw, a monster, a thing that bit and never let go. His own pulse spiked, fight or flight clawing at his chest. His brain offered options. Back out, grab something, get big. Instead, he did the thing that had kept him alive more times than he could count. He went still. "Rex," he said again. Not a shout, a tone. The one he used to use when the rookies on his team started to spiral. "With me." The dog froze. Between one breath and the next, the energy in the room changed. The train was already half a mile away, but its echo clung to the walls. The night was thick with old ghosts. Slowly, very slowly, Ethan sank down onto the floor. His knees complained. His back complained more. He ignored them. He sat cross-legged, leaving 3 feet of space between him and the dog, and lowered his gaze just enough to signal that this wasn't a staring contest. Rex panted, chest heaving. His ears flicked back, forward, back again. The whites of his eyes showed around the burning amber. Ethan held one, hand out, palm down, in the air between them, not reaching, just existing. "I know," he said quietly. "I hear it too." The words weren't for the trains. They were for the roar in his own head. The memory of a rotor wash that had brought down more than dust. The scream of a boy he hadn't saved. Something in his voice, something cracked and honest, slipped past Rex's defenses in a way commands never could. The dog's breathing slowed, his hackles smoothed, his weight shifted back, away from the window, toward the hand in the air. Then, as if it cost him something, he took one step forward and pressed his chest against Ethan's knuckles. It wasn't a cuddle, it was a choice. Ethan let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding and let his fingers curl, just enough to feel the warmth under the fur. "Good," he murmured. "Good boy, Rex." The dog's eyes slid closed for half a second. It was the first sleep either of them had had in years. The story should have ended there. One broken soldier, one broken dog, a beat-up trailer at the edge of a town the world forgot. Healing in private, slowly, imperfectly, not bothering anybody. The world never liked stories like that. It preferred the kind that trended. 3 days after Ethan brought Rex home, Cedar Falls woke up to a headline. "Dangerous war dog, loose in neighborhood, local veteran to blame?" The video hit social media the night before. A shaky clip shot from across the street by someone who'd thought they were about to capture something terrible. In the frame, a front yard, ankle-deep in snow, a girl's bicycle lying on its side, a fence half fallen from years of neglect, a mail truck idling at the curb, a dog, Rex, stood rigid in the middle of the yard, hackles stiff, staring at the figure by the mail truck, a man in a hoodie, his hand in his pocket, the girl from the bicycle halfway between them. The audio was a mess. Wind, the filmer's ragged breathing, a distant TV. Then, clear as a gunshot, a voice. "Drop it!" The man by the truck flinched. For a split second, something glinted in his hand. He bolted. Rex lunged, not at the girl, but between her and the fleeing man, teeth snapping in the air where his arm had been a heartbeat prior. Snow flew. The girl screamed. The dog barked, deep and savage enough to rattle the phone's microphone. By the time Ethan's voice cut through, "Rex, here!" and the dog spun and raced back to his side. The mail truck camera had captured enough chaos to turn into a story. The knife the man had dropped under the truck didn't make it into the clip. Neither did the fact that he'd been trying to pull the girl toward the open passenger door. What spread wasn't War Dog foils kidnapping. It was War Dog menaces child. By the time Ethan saw the video, it had already been shared by a local blogger who specialized in outrage, and by a national page that specialized in turning outrage into ad revenue. The shelter's phone rang off the hook. Lena's inbox flooded. The county commissioner called a press conference. Marla stood in the doorway of Ethan's trailer the next morning, jaw clenched. "I've been ordered to take him back," she said, "pending evaluation by an independent specialist." Ethan looked past her at the county sheriff's cruiser idling at the end of his muddy driveway, at the news van behind it, at the man in the suit leaning against the cruiser, arms folded, expression like stone. "Who's the specialist?" Ethan asked. "He's from a firm contracted by the Army," the man in the suit answered, stepping forward. "Name's Victor Marsh, Behavioral Risk Assessment." His handshake was firm, but cold. His eyes flicked over Rex, who watched from the living room doorway, head low. "I understand this animal has a history of unprovoked aggression." Ethan didn't offer him coffee. "You understand wrong." Marsh smiled without humor. "That's what we're here to determine." He wasn't Army. Ethan could see it in the way he stood, the way he wore his tie, the way he kept his weight on the balls of his feet like he expected someone to swing. Private sector, contractor. The kind who made more money in a month than Ethan had made in a year, selling solutions to problems they helped create. Rex growled, low and almost inaudible. "That video makes people nervous," Marsh said, gesturing toward the van. "Nervous people call lawyers. Lawyers call commissioners. Commissioners call the Department of Defense. And the DOD calls me." "With a sedative and a black bag?" Ethan asked. Marsh's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Let's start with an evaluation." The test took place in the back lot beside the shelter, the same cracked asphalt where kids held car washes in the summer and volunteers walked hopeful adoptees on weekends. Today it had been cleared of everything except 3 orange cones, a folding table, and a tripod camera. Lena stood off to the side, arms wrapped tight around herself. Marla hovered by the back door, phone clutched like a lifeline. A few officers from the sheriff's department watched, hands hovering near their holsters in a way they wouldn't have around a human suspect. Marsh walked the perimeter like he already owned it. "We'll start simple," he said, loud enough for the camera microphone. "Leash control, response to handler, reaction to environmental triggers." Ethan didn't take his eyes off Rex, who stood calmly at his side, watching everything without moving. "Triggers like what?" Ethan asked. Marsh snapped his fingers. A man emerged from behind the shelter, pushing a wheeled trash bin. The plastic lid rattled over the cracked pavement, loud and sudden. Rex didn't flinch. "Good," Marsh said. He nodded to someone else out of sight. A car door slammed nearby, sharp echo bouncing off the cinder block. Rex's ears flicked. His head turned toward the sound, then back again. "Impressive," Marsh admitted. "Let's ramp up." He reached under the table and pulled out a worn canvas vest. Ethan's stomach twisted. He knew that vest, or one like it, the kind they strapped on dogs before sending them into places humans didn't want to go first. Pockets for sensors and cameras and things that went boom. Rex saw it and froze. The air thickened. "Hold him," Marsh said. Ethan didn't move. "What are you doing?" Recreating duty conditions, Marsh said, too casually. We need to know how he reacts when he's in work mode, whether that aggression can be redirected, or whether it's baked in. Rex's breathing sped up. His pupils blew wide. The fur along his spine rose like a wave. Stop, Ethan said, voice low. Marsh kept walking forward, vest in hand. Cole, Lena warned. Let me. Rex exploded. The leash yanked Ethan forward as 100 pounds of muscle and memory lunged at the man with the vest. His bark tore through the lot, deep and frantic, every inch of his body screaming no. Marsh backpedaled, stumbling. The sheriff's deputies shifted, hands on their weapons. Rex! Ethan barked. The dog hit the end of the leash, whipped sideways, claws scraping asphalt. He didn't go for any human. He went for the vest, teeth snapping inches from the canvas. Back! Ethan shouted. Rex froze. The vest dangled between them like a ghost. Slowly, very slowly, the dog dropped his jaw. The bark died in his chest, replaced by a sound Ethan hadn't heard from him yet. A low, wounded whine. His front legs folded, then his back. He sank to the ground, chest heaving, eyes locked on the vest like it might bite him. Ethan's own knees threatened to give. In his head, the alley slammed back into place. Flash. Heat. A roar that tore the sky. He saw Rex, this dog, he was sure now, hurl his body between two small silhouettes and a door wired to blow. He saw a man in a vest shouting into a radio, eyes wild. Detonate! 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 An argument over the headset. Command screaming. Ethan shouting back. The timer already at 0. He heard barking, heard a name. Rex! Off! Rex! Only this time, the memory didn't fade when he blinked. It sharpened. He had gone back into the alley. He hadn't ordered the strike. He'd tried to stop it. Someone else had pushed the button. Enough, Ethan said. Marsh had regained his feet. He watched Ethan with narrowed eyes, calculating. Interesting response, he said. He associates the vest with... You knew what it would do to him, Ethan cut in. That wasn't evaluation, that was torture. Strong word, Marsh said mildly. We're simply uncovering his... baseline. Lena stepped forward. You have enough, she snapped. You saw his control, how fast he came back from a full trigger, how he stayed on Cole's voice. Any other dog would have redirected on you. Marsh tilted his head. Maybe. Or maybe we're seeing the tip of the iceberg. Either way, given the public pressure, my recommendation to the county will be to transfer him to a secure facility with appropriate containment protocols. That means kill, Ethan said. Marsh's polite smile didn't change, but his eyes turned flat. That's not my decision. I simply write the report. Das Stammwitz. They might have lost right there. One report, one signature. One dog shipped to an undisclosed facility that was just a prettier name for an incinerator. But two things happened that Victor Marsh didn't count on. The first was a woman named Harper King. Harper ran the Cedar Falls Chronicle out of a converted barber shop on Main Street. The paper went to print twice a week, on real newsprint that turned your fingers gray, because the older folks liked it, and because something in Harper believed that as long as ink still smudged, the truth still mattered. She'd grown up in town, left for journalism school, then come back angry and determined when she realized big city papers treated places like Cedar Falls as punchlines or props. She'd started following the War Dog story because it was local and visual and because outrage sold papers almost as well as it sold ad clicks. Then she'd watched the full, unedited footage from the mail truck camera. She'd seen the knife, the girl, the way Rex had jumped between them, not at them. She'd seen the way Ethan's hand shook after he'd gotten the dog under control. Not with fear, but with something like recognition. The second thing Marsh didn't count on was the collar, not the new one stamped with Rex. The old one. It arrived in a padded envelope with no return address, dropped in the shelter's overnight box. Marla almost tossed it with the donation checks and angry letters. Then she saw the tag. Sandstone Echo wasn't written in English. It was burned into the leather in a series of coded marks she'd never seen before. She didn't know what it meant. Ethan did. When Lena handed him the collar in her office and said, "This came for you," his hands went cold. The leather was worn smooth by years of sweat and dust. The brass tag was scratched, edges dented. Under the grime, faint and almost gone, were 3 letters, RXC, not Army issue. Not any program he recognized. He held it toward Rex. The dog sniffed once, twice. Then he made a sound Ethan had never heard from him. Not a bark, not a whine. A low, broken noise from somewhere deep in his chest. His tongue flicked out, touching the old leather like a greeting. Ethan's vision blurred. Somewhere in his head, someone screamed in Arabic. Somewhere else, a radio crackled with commands. But the loudest sound was his own voice, younger and rawer, shouting over everything. "Rex! Collar!" Besestasquistas. Harper wasn't supposed to see the lab report. It was marked internal. The print was faded, like it had been shoved through a dozen old fax machines before landing in Lena's inbox. The official heading read, United States Army Veterinary Corps, but half the contact information had been blacked out. Private firm, Lena muttered, scanning it. Off-site. Harper had stopped by, just to talk, and somehow ended up leaning over the desk with them. "Wait," she said, pointing. "What's that line?" Lena squinted. Chemical markers on the leather consistent with exposure to, she frowned, midazolam, ketamine, scopolamine. Why would a dog collar test positive for human sedatives? Human? Harper repeated. Those are dissociatives, Lena said slowly. Given in combination, they can erase short-term memory, make it hard to form new ones, used in surgical sedation, and a cold understanding slid behind her eyes. And in certain interrogation contexts. Harper's reporter brain lit up like a switchboard. "You're telling me," she said, "that someone pumped a military dog's collar full of memory-wiping drugs?" Lena shook her head. "They wouldn't do it for the dog. Dogs don't hold memories the way we do. They live in associations, smells, sounds, context." She looked at Ethan, who'd gone very still, knuckles white around the collar. "They do it," she whispered, "for the person who touched it most." Ethan's stomach dropped. He remembered a night after Sandstone Echo, somewhere in Kuwait or Qatar, under a tent that smelled like dust and diesel and antiseptic. He remembered a medic pressing something cold against his neck, remembered a vest coming off, a collar being unbuckled, a hand on his shoulder. "You did good, Cole," a voice had said. Someone he trusted then. "You won't want to remember this part." He'd assumed they meant the mission. What if they'd meant the dog? Harper saw his face and knew. "This isn't just about a dangerous dog," she said quietly. "Someone tried to erase him. And you. That's a story." "Harper," Lena warned, "if you print this without proof, they bury you. And us." "Good thing I like digging," Harper replied. In the end, the proof didn't come from a classified file or a whistleblower. It came from a kid with a YouTube channel and too much time. Harper's article, Local War Dog, Hero or Menace, went viral in exactly the way she'd planned. Not because of the headline, which she'd crafted to sound balanced. Not because of the photo of Rex and Ethan, which she'd snapped from across the street with a zoom lens. Because of the 3 paragraphs buried in the middle, the ones about the collar, the ones about the erased memories. One of Harper's readers was a college sophomore at Purdue who had once wanted to be a vet and now wanted to be a content creator. He did deep dives into military tech and conspiracy theories from his bedroom. His videos mixed actual research with late-night speculation in an intoxicating way that drew millions of views and constant eye rolls from actual journalists. He grabbed the story, slapped a clickbait title on it, and started digging. 48 hours later, he posted a video titled "The War Dog They Tried to Erase and the Soldier Who Remembers." In it, he pulled up obscure procurement contracts, heavily redacted DARPA proposals, and a handful of patent filings from a biotech company called Neuradapt Systems, headquartered in Chicago with a small research facility near Mosul during the height of the war. Their specialty? Neuroassociative conditioning in canines and human subjects for rapid threat response and memory modulation. The patents mentioned collars. They mentioned midazolam, ketamine, and scopolamine. They mentioned a trial program designated Project REXCC. The video hit 1 million views in a day. Victor Marsh saw it. So did his bosses. So did people in the Pentagon who hadn't heard the word Sandstone Echo in years and had hoped never to again. The next morning, someone tried to break into Ethan's trailer. It was subtle at first. A car he didn't recognize parked just long enough across the road at 2 in the morning. A white van with no logo cruising past the shelter 3 times in an hour. A man in a suit with the wrong kind of shoes sitting in the diner, pretending to read a menu while his eyes kept tracking Harper's laptop. Ethan had lived too long in places where the difference between paranoid and prepared was a coffin. He noticed. So did Rex. The second night, at 3 a.m., the dog rose from his spot by the bedroom door and went rigid, nose lifted, every muscle locking. Ethan had been half asleep. Rex's change from relaxed to ready snapped him awake harder than any alarm. "What is it?" he whispered. Rex didn't bark. He padded to the living room and put his nose to the bottom of the door, sucking in air so hard his sides flared. Then he backed away, teeth bared, a growl humming in his chest. Ethan killed the lamp. Through the thin curtains, he saw the outline. Someone at the door, hunched over the lock. Adrenaline flushed his limbs cold. In Mosul, the move would have been simple. Flash bang, takedown, zip ties, interrogation. Here, in Cedar Falls, Indiana, with a dog under a kill order and a past under a microscope, he had to be smarter. He tapped his phone once, silently bringing up Lena's number, then Harper's. Then 911. He didn't hit call yet. Instead, he reached for the collar hanging on the back of the door, the old one, the one that had seen more fire than his entire town. He buckled it around Rex's neck. The dog shuddered once, like a shock had gone through him. "Easy," Ethan whispered. "This time, we decide what happens." The lockpicker outside cursed softly. Metal squealed. The knob turned. The door swung inward 3 inches before something slammed it shut from the inside. Not Ethan. Rex. He'd hurled his full weight against the wood, teeth snapping at the gap. The man outside swore again, louder this time, and the sound of his footsteps pounding away down the porch steps echoed in the dark. Ethan yanked the door open in time to see a dark sedan, fishtailing in the gravel, taillights flaring. Rex stood in the doorway, chest heaving, eyes bright, watching the car go. He didn't chase. He didn't leave the threshold. He'd done his job. Harper arrived 10 minutes later, wearing sweatpants and a coat 2 sizes too big, hair scraped back, press badge swinging around her neck like armor. The sheriff's deputy who responded, a young guy named Mark, who'd once played linebacker and now played keep the peace, took the statement with wide eyes and nervous jokes. "Probably just some punk," he said. "Heard you got a famous dog." Harper met Ethan's gaze over his shoulder. They both knew better. The next morning, Harper's headline read, "Break in at war. Dog handlers home. Questions grow around Neuradopt." Neuradopt's stock dipped 3% by noon. By sunset, Victor Marsh was back in town. He didn't go to the shelter. He went to City Hall. The emergency council meeting would have been boring if it hadn't been about life and death. The Cedar Falls Council Chamber was a converted school auditorium with folding chairs and a microphone that squealed whenever anyone breathed too hard. Retirees filled the first 2 rows. Local business owners clumped together in the middle, smelling of coffee and fryer oil and printer ink. A handful of reporters from out of town hovered near the back. On the side, out of the glow of the fluorescents, Ethan sat with Lena and Harper. Rex lay under his chair, head on his paws, eyes tracking every motion in the room. Councilman Jeffers, who had made a career out of looking concerned while doing very little, banged a gavel borrowed from the high school debate club. "Order," he said, voice trembling slightly. "We're here to address public safety concerns regarding the animal known as Rex." Harper's jaw clenched. Victor Marsh sat at the front. Flawless suit, flawless posture, flawless polite half-smile. Beside him, on an easel, were 3 enlarged stills from the viral videos: the yard, the mail truck, the vest. "Thank you, Councilman," Marsh said when given the floor. "First, I want to emphasize that I respect Sergeant Cole's service. Our concern is not with him. It is with the animal. We have an obligation to protect corporate secrets." Harper cut in from the floor. Gasps. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Jeffers fumbled with his gavel. "Ms. King, please." "Neuradopt Systems has an obligation. To its shareholders," Harper went on, voice rising. "The Army has an obligation to its image. You, gentlemen, have an obligation to the people of this town. So, Maybe we should talk about the fact that this dangerous animal risked his life to put himself between a kid and a man with a knife, and between two children and a bomb in a war zone. You have no proof of that, Marsh snapped, the Polish cracking for the first time. Harper smiled, sharp and fierce. You're right, she said. I didn't, until now. She nodded toward the back door. A woman stepped in, a boy at her side. The woman looked about 30, with tired eyes and a nervous twitch in her hands. The boy was maybe 12, dark-haired, thin, with a faint scar along his left cheek. Ethan's breath stopped. He knew that scar. He'd seen it in a dream, on a face coated with dust and tears. The translator's daughter from Mosul had survived. In the real world, she had been evacuated, adopted, grown up in the Midwest with a new name and a second language. She now stood at the front of a small town council chamber with her foster mother, clutching a photograph. This is Layla, Harper said softly. She was 8 years old when a bomb was wired to the only door out of her family's apartment. A unit designated Sandstone Echo was told to clear the block. They were given an experimental tool, a dog with a neuroconditioning collar. They were also given an impossible set of orders. She glanced at Ethan. He was barely breathing. Layla doesn't remember everything, Harper continued. Trauma does that. But she remembers a dog. She remembers someone shouting in English and Arabic, and she remembers this. Layla handed her the photograph. It was old and worn, edges soft, colors faded. In it, a German shepherd stood in the dust, tongue lolling, eyes bright. Next to him knelt a younger Ethan Cole, arms slung around the dog's neck, both of them spattered with dirt and something darker. Behind them, half a building lay in rubble. In front of them, a small shape in a green shirt peeked from behind a broken wall. The boy in the council chamber stared at the picture, then at Rex. The dog, who had barely moved under Ethan's chair, rose, slowly, quietly. He stepped out into the aisle. No one stopped him. He walked past the rows of folding chairs, past the outstretched hands that twitched and then pulled back. He stopped 3 feet from the boy and stood, still as stone. The boy's eyes filled. He reached out, fingers trembling, and rested his hand on Rex's head. The dog closed his eyes. In the back, someone started to clap. It wasn't much at first, a slow, uncertain sound. It spread. The retirees, the business owners, the kids who'd snuck in at the back because they had heard there was going to be a fight. Even Councilman Jeffers joined in, more to be on the right side of history than because he understood it. Marsh stood, jaw tight. This is emotional manipulation, he snapped over the applause. This animal is a piece of experimental equipment, property of Neuradapt Systems and its contracting agencies. It is not... That's enough, another voice cut in. Everyone turned. A man in uniform stood in the doorway. Not Marsh's kind of uniform. Army, dress greens, ribbons neat, hair clipped close, eyes tired. There was no swagger in him, no shine. Just the quiet gravity of someone who'd signed too many condolence letters. Colonel Adam Reyes, he said, stepping forward. Judge Advocate General's Corps. I've been reviewing Neuradapt's contracts for the past 48 hours. He held up a thick folder. Project REXC was unauthorized, he said. The experimental collars were used on soldiers without informed consent. Tests were conducted off-site, without proper oversight. Several mission debriefs, including Sandstone Echo, were altered. His gaze pinned Marsh. Sergeant Cole did not disobey orders, Reyes said. The record you used to justify drugging him and confiscating his partner was falsified. The order to detonate while civilians remained on site came from a Neuradapt project lead acting outside of his authority. He is currently under investigation. The room went very quiet. This animal, Reyes went on, nodding toward Rex, was listed as equipment. That was a mistake. He's a decorated combatant. Under the new regulations, he's entitled to retirement, not disposal. He turned to Ethan. Sergeant Cole, your record will be amended. Your actions during Sandstone Echo will be recognized as valorous, not insubordinate. And, if you're willing, he glanced at Rex. I'd like to talk to you about consulting on a new program, one that does right by dogs like him. Marsh's face had gone pale. This isn't over, he hissed under his breath, only loud enough for Ethan and Harper and Lena to hear. We built the future with those collars. You can't put that genie back. Harper's recorder clicked on. Want to say that again for the people in the back? She asked sweetly. Awesome. The ceremony didn't make the national news. By then, the country had moved on to other scandals and other outrage. But in Cedar Falls, Indiana, the high school gym was packed. They'd set up folding chairs and a makeshift stage with a slightly crooked backdrop painted by the art club. A banner read, "Thank you for your service. SSG Cole and Roy X," in hand-lettered blue paint. Someone's grandma had baked 3 sheet cakes with flag frosting. Ethan stood at the center of the stage in a uniform he hadn't worn in years. The jacket fit tighter across the shoulders now, but the weight of it felt right. Colonel Reyes pinned a medal on his chest, not the Silver Star. That would have taken more time, more paperwork, more politics. But a commendation that meant something anyway. For actions taken under fire to protect civilian lives during Operation Sandstone Echo, Reyes said. For refusing to follow an illegal order, for bravery that extended beyond the battlefield, to fight for the truth long after the shooting stopped. Applause rattled the bleachers. Rex sat at Ethan's side, wearing his own new collar. This one had no electronics, no hidden sedatives, just leather and brass and a tag that read, "Rex, retired." After the ceremony, kids crowded around, parents took pictures, old men clapped Ethan on the back and told him stories about Korea and Vietnam and Desert Storm. Harper worked the room with her notebook. Lena hovered near the punch bowl, keeping one eye on Ethan's breathing. He felt like he was moving through water. He'd never expected absolution, certainly not in a gym with bad acoustics and folding chairs. At some point, the crowd shifted. A path opened. Layla's foster mother stood there, hands on the boy's shoulders. The boy, no longer 8, no longer in a green shirt, no longer covered in dust, held out something small and shiny. A dog tag. "I kept it," he said, voice quiet. His accent was Midwest with a hint of something older. "It flew off when it happened. My sister grabbed it and we hid it. My mom said it belonged to the dog who saved us." Ethan took it with shaking fingers. The tag was scratched, bent, almost unreadable. But under the scars, 3 letters were still visible. RXC. "Thank you," Ethan managed. The boy nodded. He looked at Rex. You saved her," the boy whispered in Arabic, so soft only the dog and Ethan heard. "Shukran." Rex leaned into him. For once, Ethan didn't see fire. He saw 2 kids on bikes in an Indiana summer, an old dog asleep on a porch, a man who could walk down a street without counting exits. He saw a future. Maybe 6 months later, on the outskirts of Cedar Falls, a new sign went up on an old barn. It was hand-painted, letters careful and proud. Second Chance, K9, Rehab and Retirement. The barn smelled of sawdust and straw and hope. Inside, runs lined the walls, not of chain link and concrete, but of smooth wood and soft bedding. A fenced field stretched out back, dotted with agility equipment and shaded by an old oak that had seen more summers than any of them. Dogs filled the space. Some limped. Some wore old scars like medals. Some trembled at every new sound. Others moved with the kind of coiled grace only training could give. All of them had tags that began with acronyms and ended with numbers and programs someone somewhere would have preferred the world forget. Ethan moved among them like he'd been born there. He wore jeans and a t-shirt with the Second Chance logo, a simple silhouette of a dog and a soldier, back to back. The medal from the ceremony sat in a drawer at home, next to his old dog tag and the RXC collar. He didn't need to wear proof anymore. People came from all over. Some drove hours, some flew. Some found their way there because Harper had written about it, or because Layla had done a school project, or because some kid online had made a viral video titled "The Dogs They Tried to Throw Away." They came to volunteer, to adopt, to cry in the straw, while a dog who had seen too much rested his head in their lap. Lena ran group sessions in the loft, veterans and dogs together, learning to breathe past panic. Harper set up a little desk in the corner, laptop humming, always looking for the next story that needed light. Colonel Reyes sent transfer papers and funding whenever he could, fighting a quieter war in offices and courtrooms. And Rex was king. He moved through the barn like a tide, checking on each run, bumping noses, breaking up small scuffles with a look. When a new dog arrived, shaking and snarling, they didn't rush him. They let Rex handle it. He'd stand a few feet away, head tilted, breathing slow and steady until the new arrival's growls turned to whines, then to silence. Sometimes it took hours, sometimes days. He had time. At night, when the barn quieted and the cicadas took over the soundtrack, Ethan would sit on the back steps with Rex at his side, watching the fireflies. He still had bad nights, still woke up sometimes with his heart racing and the taste of dust in his mouth. But when he did, there was always a weight against his leg, a steady breathing, a pair of amber eyes watching the door. "You remember more than I do," he'd say softly. Rex would huff, the closest thing to a laugh a dog could make. "Good," Ethan whispered. "Somebody's got to. If you've made it this far, maybe there's a part of you that understands what it means to carry ghosts. Maybe you've loved a dog that saw you on the days no one else did. Maybe you've wondered if the worst thing you ever did defines you forever. It doesn't. Sometimes the very thing you think will destroy you, the memory, the mistake, the scar, the dog everyone else wrote off, is the thing that leads you home." Lesson. We live in a world that throws away what it doesn't understand. People, animals, stories that don't fit on a headline. Ethan Cole believed he was the sum of his worst moment, and that the universe had punished him by letting him live with it. Rex was labeled a weapon gone wrong, a problem to be erased quietly. But truth doesn't stay buried forever. It waits in old collars and half-remembered commands and kids who grow up and refuse to forget. It waits in the loyalty of a dog who never stopped looking for his handler, even when they told him that handler didn't exist anymore. The bond between Ethan and Rex didn't heal them overnight. It didn't erase the past. What it did was give that pain a purpose, to protect, to expose the lies, to make sure no one else got drugged, discarded, or detonated for someone else's profit. Your scars, like theirs, aren't proof that you're broken. They're proof that you survived, and somewhere, whether it walks on 2 legs or 4, there is a heart tuned to the same frequency as yours, waiting to recognize you in the dark and say, without words, with me, we're going home.